How do you kill a Hollywood legend and still sleep at night? Not with silence, not with a weapon, but with a name. Because sometimes the sharpest blade isn't a knife, it's a confession. And what Nick Reiner just leaked from behind prison walls is slicing Hollywood wide open. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Rob Reiner, 78. Acclaimed director, political voice, cultural icon, found murdered in his $13.5 million Brentwood mansion alongside his wife, Michelle, 70. Stabbed. Brutally. Methodically. No sign of forced entry. No alarms triggered. Just silence, and then screams. The suspect? His own son, Nick Reiner, 32 years old. Writer. Recovering addict. Hollywood royalty born into dysfunction and wealth. The boy who never escaped the shadow of his father's fame. Arrested that very night, just steps from the blood-soaked scene. But here's the twist nobody expected. He says he didn't act alone, and he's naming names. Not strangers, not outsiders. His sister, his brother, his father's lifelong best friend. Tracy Reiner, Jake Reiner, Billy Crystal. Yes, Billy Crystal. Why would a beloved comedian and family friend be implicated in one of the most twisted Hollywood murder cases of the decade? Why would a brother allegedly hold the door, while a sister whispered the timing? And why did Romy Reiner, just 27 years old, tell police that someone else in the family should be a suspect before anyone else had spoken? These are the questions the world is asking. These are the questions the media isn't answering. Because the deeper you dig into this story, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Nick's confession was never supposed to go public. The list of alleged accomplices was buried in sealed court documents. But someone on the inside leaked it. And now it's out. Every name, every link, every betrayal. The Hollywood elite is panicking. PR firms are scrambling. Studios are distancing themselves. And inside that Los Angeles County holding cell, Nick Reiner is smirking. Because according to him, this wasn't just a murder. It was a production. Planned, rehearsed, acted, and directed. So let's rewind. Let's go back to that Sunday morning when everything changed. The calm before the collapse. It was unusually quiet at the Brentwood estate. The Reiners hadn't hosted guests that week. No red carpets. No private chefs. Just Rob, Michelle, and the echo of legacy hanging in the air. Nick had reportedly moved back into the guest house just months prior. A return to heel, as Tracy called it. But insiders say something darker was happening behind those walls. Tensions, arguments, old wounds reopening. Then at 6:42 a.m., the LAPD received a frantic 911 call. The caller? Romy Reiner. Voice shaking. She whispered words that still haven't been fully released to the public. But one line got leaked. He's dangerous, but not the one you think. By the time officers arrived, it was too late. Rob and Michelle were already gone. Blood pooled across the marble floors of the master suite. A shattered picture frame lay face down on the hallway table. And on the kitchen counter, a red-stained envelope addressed to Jake. The arrest that shocked Hollywood. Nick didn't run. When officers approached the guest house, they found him sitting cross-legged on the floor. Calm, almost sedated. He allegedly looked up, smiled, and said, "I was waiting for you." No signs of struggle. No weapon in his hands. But detectives later claimed they found a bloodied hoodie stuffed beneath the guest house mattress. When the press got wind of the arrest, the Reiner name ignited across every headline in America. Rob Reiner murdered by his own son. But behind the scenes, something even more disturbing was unfolding. Nick wasn't denying his involvement. He was explaining it, and not with regret. With calculation. According to a court leak, Nick admitted to being part of what needed to be done. But then, he dropped the bombshell that changed everything. I didn't kill him alone. They helped. They were all in on it. Every one of them. He was referring to Tracy, Jake, Billy. 3 people who, on the outside, appeared to have nothing in common but Rob Reiner himself. But Nick told a different story. One filled with bitterness, secret meetings, financial threats, and years of psychological warfare. A story about legacy, lies, and what he called Hollywood's most twisted script. Why it matters now? Because this isn't just a tragedy. It's a reckoning. Nick's confession isn't just a window into a family unraveling. It's a mirror reflecting the darkness beneath the glitz of fame. If his story is true, then what we know about Rob Reiner's life, his legacy, his family, has been a lie for years. And if it's false, then someone else is out there, walking free, maybe even laughing. Either way, someone is lying. And someone powerful has everything to lose. The media won't touch it. Networks are hesitant to run coverage implicating names like Billy Crystal. Agents are pressuring producers to cancel interviews with Tracy and Jake. Court transcripts are being redacted. Witnesses are suddenly unavailable. But Nick keeps talking. And with each word, another secret slips through the cracks. The story is unraveling, and no one is safe. A Hollywood bloodline in crisis. Let's not forget who these people are. Tracy Reiner, adoptive daughter of Rob. Actress. Hollywood insider. Allegedly resentful of Nick's return. Jake Reiner, the golden child. A polished, clean-cut journalist who has always played the respectable heir, but now being questioned about deleted texts and a missing hard drive. Billy Crystal, the face of classic American comedy. Rob Reiner's close friend and creative partner. So why did Nick call him the ghost director of the whole thing? This isn't just scandal. It's a collapse. A crumbling of a dynasty built on decades of fame, influence, and buried resentment. And it all started with a leak. A list. A son who refused to take the fall alone. The housekeeper's whisper. Before we dive into the names and what Nick actually said, there's one more piece of the puzzle you need to know. An eyewitness. The Reiner's longtime housekeeper. Quiet. Loyal. Invisible until now. She reportedly told detectives that something felt off the night before the murders. She heard whispers coming from the theater room. Laughter. A door closing. Then a silence so heavy, she left early. She also said one more thing before refusing further comment. I saw Tracy carrying something wrapped in a blanket. I thought it was a gift, but it was too heavy for that. Her statement hasn't been made public yet. But it's been confirmed by two sources. That blanket? Never found. But a similar one was pulled from a dumpster 2 blocks away. Stained. Slashed. Being tested. And it wasn't from the guest house. It matched the bedding in the master suite. The leak no one was ready for. 2 days ago, the full confession leaked. A prison guard allegedly sold a copy of the typed list to a tabloid. Now, law enforcement is in damage control mode. But the names are already out there. So are the motives. The evidence. The coded language. The secret tapes. The next 15 chapters will take you deep into every detail, one name at a time. One motive at a time. One betrayal at a time. You'll hear how Tracy allegedly staged emotional outbursts to confuse the timeline. How Jake may have tampered with camera footage. And how Billy Crystal allegedly held the one piece of evidence that could have saved Rob's life. We'll break down the leaked texts. The erased voicemails. The strange behavior during Rob's final public appearance. We'll expose the contradictions in their statements. The secret meetings with lawyers. The power struggle over Rob's legacy and estate. And most importantly, we'll ask the questions no one in the mainstream media will dare to ask. Because someone's still lying. And Nick Reiner may be behind bars. But the true puppet master may still be out there. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The scene that still doesn't make sense. Let's zoom in on that morning again. The Brentwood estate was quiet, too quiet. By the time first responders arrived, it was already a media circus. Neighbors peeking through hedges. Paparazzi swarming like vultures. LAPD trying to cordon off the area while whispers were already flying. And in the center of it all, a crime scene that didn't add up. No forced entry. No signs of struggle in the living room or kitchen. But the master bedroom looked like a horror film set. Multiple stab wounds. Blood patterns indicating overkill. Some wounds were deep and focused. Others erratic and desperate. But here's the kicker. Experts say it looked like 2 people inflicted the injuries. That's what the coroner's office hasn't said publicly. But insiders leaked that Rob's wounds were significantly different from Michelle's. Different depth. Different angles. One inflicted by someone likely left-handed, and the other? Right-handed. Nick Reiner is left-handed. So who was the other? Tracy? Jake? Billy? Or someone else entirely? This is where the leak becomes critical. Because Nick didn't just name his accomplices. He mapped out how each of them was involved. And the plan was more elaborate than anyone expected. Nick's alleged timeline of the murder. According to what's been leaked, Nick told investigators that the murder wasn't impulsive. It was, in his words, a production. A 3-act play. Act 1. Divide and isolate. Tracy was tasked with keeping Rob and Michelle in the bedroom longer than usual. She allegedly showed up late the night before, claiming she had surprise legal papers to discuss about a new documentary Rob was funding, one she claimed Jake was trying to sabotage. Rob let her in. Michelle was already asleep. There's no camera footage of Tracy leaving that night. Act 2. Cut the eyes. Jake allegedly handled the surveillance. He was always tech-savvy. He had helped Rob install the entire home security system. But the morning after the murder, the cameras were mysteriously offline between 2 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. Why? Because, Nick claims, Jake disabled them remotely from his apartment using backdoor software no one else knew existed. Act 3. Finale. That's the word Nick used. He claims he entered the main house at 4:15 a.m. through the side entrance that Tracy left unlocked. He says he finished what was asked of him. But the chilling part? He alleges Billy Crystal was on the phone with him during the murder, feeding him instructions, reminding him of the plan, calming him when he began to panic. That claim hasn't been verified, but one fact has. Nick's phone records show a 37-minute call to a number traced to Billy Crystal's private New York line. At the exact time of the murder, Hollywood's golden friend, tarnished? Why would Billy Crystal, the face of When Harry Met Sally and a known close friend of Rob Reiner, be on the phone with Nick the night of the murder? The two hadn't been seen together publicly in over a year. Some say the friendship soured over a script Rob refused to sell. Others believe Billy had invested in Rob's final film project and stood to lose millions if it collapsed. Still, these are theories. What we do know is that Billy Crystal's team has refused all interviews since the leak. His lawyer issued a short, cold statement. Mr. Crystal has no involvement whatsoever in this case. Any implication otherwise is malicious, defamatory, and will be met with legal action. But that doesn't explain the phone call, or the texts recovered from Nick's iCloud backup. One of them read, "Make sure it's quiet. No mistakes. This is it." And it was signed, BC. Coincidence? Or coded message? You decide. A family drenched in secrets. Here's where it gets even darker. Nick reportedly told detectives that this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about legacy. He believed Rob was going to rewrite the family will, that he was planning to hand everything, his production company, his royalties, his Brentwood property, over to Jake and Tracy, cutting Nick out entirely. Whether or not that's true hasn't been confirmed. But one shocking detail has emerged. Just 3 weeks before the murder, Rob had a private meeting with his estate lawyer. The topic? Emergency redistribution of assets. He never signed the new papers. And now, those draft documents are missing. Gone. Stolen from the study. The study that police say showed no signs of a break-in. Only a drawer pried open from the inside. Was someone in the family trying to erase the trail? The missing evidence no one's talking about. In a Hollywood case, there's always one crucial piece of evidence. And in this one, it might be a flash drive. According to a source close to the investigation, Rob kept a digital diary, audio recordings, voice memos, thoughts, plans, fears. He often recorded private conversations, especially when dealing with family disputes. He claimed it helped him stay clear-headed. Detectives believe he may have recorded the final conversation he had with Tracy and Jake, just hours before his murder. But the drive is missing, and the only person who knew where Rob kept it? Romy, the same daughter who called 911. The same daughter who told police someone else should be a suspect. The same daughter who disappeared from social media the morning after the murder and hasn't posted since. What did she hear? What did she see? And why is she suddenly silent? The questions that must be asked. So here we are. Rob Reiner is dead. Nick is behind bars. And Hollywood is spinning. But the questions remain. Why would a son name his own siblings and a close family friend as co-conspirators? Why are key witnesses suddenly vanishing? Why does so much evidence point to multiple people, but only one is arrested? Why is the LAPD remaining silent on the list? And why are powerful names like Billy Crystal's being scrubbed from mainstream reports? It's as if the industry wants this to go away, to disappear quietly. But that's not going to happen, because this story is just beginning. And what comes next will shake the foundation of one of Hollywood's most celebrated families. Why would someone commit a double murder and then calmly sit on the floor, waiting for police, almost as if he'd just finished directing a movie scene. That was the first question that rattled the minds of detectives, reporters, and the Reiner family's closest friends. Nick Reiner, son of the legendary Rob Reiner, wasn't found hiding in an alley. He didn't flee. He didn't resist. He was sitting cross-legged in the guest house behind the Reiner family mansion. Calm, silent, almost meditative. When the door opened, he looked up slowly, his eyes glassy, his hands resting on his knees. The responding officer said it looked like he had been there for hours, waiting. And what they found in that guest house was far more terrifying than anyone imagined. The room that wasn't just a room. At first glance, the guest house seemed unremarkable. A tidy kitchenette, a leather couch, some books, a few framed posters of classic films. But when the crime scene unit began inspecting closely, the ordinary became eerie. The walls were decorated with index cards, hundreds of them, lined up in rows, numbered, labeled. Each one had a line of dialogue written in thick black marker. Lines like, "He always said I'd never be good enough. Legacy isn't earned, it's taken. One last rewrite. One final act." At first, they thought it was a screenplay. But the more they read, the more they realized this wasn't fiction. It was a confession, a timeline, a scripted murder. One of the cards read, "Tracy enters 11:37 p.m., exits undetected." Another, "Disable cameras 2 a.m. sharp. Jake handles remote." The dates? They matched the night of the murder. The times? They lined up with the gaps in surveillance footage. And at the center of it all, a storyboard labeled, "Final Cut." This wasn't a living space. It was a planning room, a staging area, a director's bunker for something horrifying. The journal no one was supposed to find. On the nightstand beside Nick's bed, officers discovered a worn, leather-bound notebook. The first page read, "It all ends here. With blood, with light, with applause." Every page after that spiraled further into madness. Nick had written conversations, imagined or real, with every member of his family. In one entry, dated 2 months before the murder, he wrote, "Tracy still looks at me like I'm a burden. But she doesn't know what I know. She thinks I'm weak. But soon she'll see I've always been the one holding the matches." Another entry. "Jake pretends he's above it all. Mr. Journalism. But he'd throw Dad under a train if it meant one more news segment with his face on it. And he has. They all have." Then, chillingly, "They made me the villain in the Reiner story. But I'm rewriting the ending." This journal, combined with the wall of index cards, told a narrative more sinister than anyone could have guessed. Nick wasn't just confessing. He was directing. And his family? He cast them in roles they didn't even know they were playing. Or maybe they did. Because the next piece of evidence would change everything. The photos hidden behind the mirror. Behind the bathroom mirror, detectives found a narrow, hollow space. Inside were several printed photographs, most grainy, some clearly zoomed-in surveillance stills. But one series stood out. A set of pictures showing Tracy Reiner walking into the main house at 11:37 p.m. Jake Reiner sitting at a laptop in his apartment with what appears to be surveillance software open. Billy Crystal at a dinner table in New York, on the phone at 4 a.m. LA time. All photos time-stamped. All matching the times Nick had scribbled in his notes. Where did he get these? Who helped him take them? It appeared someone else was feeding Nick this information, or maybe he was stalking his own family for months. Either way, the intent was clear. Nick was building a case before the murder. He was collecting receipts, or crafting a defense, the music playing on loop. As officers searched the guest house, they noted something strange. A Bluetooth speaker in the corner was softly playing music on a loop. The song? "Everybody Wants to Rule the World" by Tears for Fears. Over and over. A hauntingly ironic choice, given the context. The lyrics echoed eerily through the walls as forensic techs examined blood-soaked garments and memory cards. "Welcome to your life / there's no turning back / even while we sleep / we will find you acting on your best behavior." Was this Nick's personal soundtrack for the crime? Was it symbolic? Or just a coincidence? One officer said it felt like stepping into a performance art exhibit, as if Nick had set the whole thing up not just as a murder, but as a message. And that message hadn't yet been fully delivered. The surveillance USB drive. In the kitchen drawer, buried beneath takeout menus and expired credit cards, they found a USB thumb drive. Encrypted, password protected. But when the digital forensics team cracked it 2 days later, what they uncovered was damning. The drive contained surveillance clips from inside the house, clips no one was supposed to have, not even Rob himself. One video showed Rob and Michelle in a heated argument about inheritance. Another showed Tracy slipping something into Rob's tea while pretending to hug him. A third showed Jake standing in front of the main server box with a toolkit. None of these videos were from visible home security cameras. They were hidden angles, planted inside the house, watching from vents and ceilings. Nick had somehow bugged the estate. And if he did that, how long had he been watching? What else did he see? The video log, confession before curtain. Lastly, police discovered a video file labeled confession before curtain _final.mov. It was Nick, sitting on the couch, wearing the same hoodie they later found with blood on it. His eyes were sunken. His tone was measured. He looked directly into the camera and said, "This wasn't supposed to happen. But they forced it. They all did. I just rewrote the ending." The 47-minute recording includes references to family arguments, betrayal over money, and vague threats about what they did to Mom. An odd phrase, considering Michelle Reiner was still alive when the video was allegedly recorded. Or was it a slip? Had something happened before the murder that hadn't been discovered yet? Nick ended the video with a chilling sign-off. Lights out, and then stared at the lens in complete silence for 90 seconds. Why the guest house matters most. In most murder cases, the killer tries to cover their tracks. They destroy evidence. They run. They deny. Nick did none of that. Instead, he crafted a space that looked less like a hideout and more like a set. He left clues. He narrated his descent. He curated every inch of the guest house to tell a story, not just to the police, but to the public. As if, in his mind, this wasn't a crime, it was a premiere. A tragic tale where he was both the villain and the victim. But here's what's most disturbing. The evidence from the guest house doesn't just incriminate Nick. It casts shadows on Tracy, on Jake, on Billy. Because while he clearly orchestrated something, the evidence suggests he may not have been alone. Someone helped him plant those cameras. Someone fed him those photos. Someone coached him on how to act when it was all over. So the question isn't just why Nick waited for the police. It's who told him to wait, and what did they promise him in return? And just when detectives thought they'd uncovered everything, a neighbor came forward with a grainy Ring doorbell video that changed the timeline completely. The doorbell footage that shattered the timeline. The Reiners' Brentwood neighborhood was known for its peace and privacy. Gated estates, high hedges, tight security. But in the age of digital eyes, no street goes unwatched. Not even for the Hollywood elite. 3 days after the murder, a neighbor stepped forward. A retired dentist named George Myers. Not exactly the kind of person you'd expect to have crucial evidence in a Hollywood double homicide. But George had recently installed a doorbell camera, one that pointed diagonally across the street. He told police he hadn't checked it initially. He didn't want to get involved. But when news broke that Nick Reiner had named accomplices, and those names included Billy Crystal, George got curious. And what he saw on the footage left him stunned. At exactly 4:19 a.m., less than an hour before Romy Reiner's 911 call, the camera captured a blurry figure walking swiftly along the sidewalk in front of the Reiner estate. Not Nick. The build was different. Taller. Slimmer. The person was wearing a hoodie, pulled tight over the head, and gloves, despite the LA heat. They stopped at the side gate, punched in a code, and entered the property. That gate code was only known by immediate family and staff. Seconds later, a second figure appeared. This one smaller. Also in a hoodie. They waited outside, nervously pacing. Then, after exactly 6 minutes, they entered too. The timestamp? 4:25 a.m., which directly contradicts Nick's claim that he entered alone. If he was already inside the house executing what he called the finale, who were these two other people? More importantly, why did the police not mention this footage in the initial report? Had they missed it? Or were they hiding it? Either way, once George turned over the footage, internal pressure exploded. And Nick? He smirked when he was shown the video. He allegedly whispered, "Told you I wasn't the only one." A chilling new theory emerges. At this point, investigators began rethinking the entire sequence of events. What if Nick's role wasn't the primary one? What if he was manipulated? What if someone else, maybe even one of his own siblings, used his fractured mental state to make him the fall guy? Because in that guest house were also dozens of prescription bottles, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety medications, some prescribed, some not. Toxicology reports later revealed Nick had high levels of sedatives in his system, enough to impair decision-making, but not to knock him out. Experts said he may have been under influence during the time of the murder, raising more questions. Did someone dose him beforehand? Was he coached into believing he had committed the murder? Or worse, was he simply used to plan a false trail? Suddenly, the confession, the video, the index cards, all of it took on a different tone. Maybe it wasn't Nick staging the story. Maybe someone else staged it for him. The deleted messages that resurfaced. Around the same time, digital forensics uncovered a set of deleted texts from Nick's phone, recovered through backup software. These messages weren't addressed to Tracy or Jake. They were to someone saved only as director. The contents? I'm scared. What if it goes wrong? You promised I wouldn't be alone. Are they going to blame me? The finale is coming, but I can't breathe. And then, one final message. Tell Romy not to come home. That last message was never sent. Investigators believe Nick may have tried to warn his youngest sibling, Romy, away from the scene. But why? Was he protecting her? Or was she never meant to see what happened? And who was director? Some believe it was a code name for Billy Crystal. Others argue it was Jake. But the truly disturbing theory? That it was Tracy. Why? Because several entries in Nick's journal referred to her as the one who made it all make sense. The red blanket revelation. Let's rewind briefly to a detail mentioned earlier. The housekeepers claimed that she saw Tracy carrying a heavy, blanket-wrapped object out of the main house the day before the murders. At the time, it was a strange but unverified claim, until the dumpster footage surfaced. A surveillance camera from a gas station 2 blocks away caught a figure, matching Tracy's height and build, tossing a red blanket into a trash container behind the station at 5:02 a.m. on the morning of the murder. The timing is suspicious. So is the location, out of the way and not near her usual driving route. Police recovered that blanket days later. It was soaked in blood. DNA tests are still pending, but preliminary results confirm it belongs to someone in the Reiner household. This is key. Because if Tracy wasn't involved, what was she doing disposing of a blood-soaked blanket hours after the murder? Why didn't she mention it to investigators? Why hasn't she spoken publicly at all? And why did she retain one of the top criminal defense attorneys in Los Angeles before her name was even leaked? A family hiding in plain sight. By the end of the week, the guest house had become the epicenter of a case now spiraling into chaos. The media couldn't ignore it anymore. The leaks were flooding the internet. The photos, the notes, the director messages, all painted a picture of not just a murder, but a production. Every detail, every movement, orchestrated. But who was pulling the strings? Was Nick the puppet master? Or just the puppet? And most damning of all, if he didn't act alone, where are the other accomplices now? Because none of the other Reiner siblings have been arrested. Billy Crystal has refused to appear publicly since the leak. And Romy? Romy vanished. Her last known location was a friend's condo in West Hollywood. After that, silence. No phone calls. No texts. No interviews. It's as if she disappeared on purpose. Or someone made sure she did. Closing the chapter, but opening a nightmare. The guest house should have been a place of peace. Recovery. Healing. That's what the Reiners told the world when Nick moved back in after rehab. But what it really became was the stage for a tragedy no one saw coming. And that guest house now holds the darkest secrets of a family whose name once meant laughter, legacy, and storytelling magic. But now, it means betrayal, blood, and silence. And yet, we're just getting started. Because what happened inside the guest house is only half the story. The other half happened behind the scenes in emails, diaries, and late-night phone calls. And in Chapter 2, we go deeper. Because the name Nick whispered next wasn't Tracy. It was her. The woman everyone forgot about. Until now. She walked in like nothing had happened, Nick reportedly said. But she was the one who told me how to do it. Who was he talking about? Chapter 2 will expose it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said, "You finally did it." That's what Nick Reiner reportedly told detectives in the early hours of his interrogation. Face pale, voice cracked, but eyes oddly satisfied. When they asked him who walked into the master bedroom just minutes after the murder, he didn't hesitate. He whispered it. Tracy Reiner, adopted daughter of Rob Reiner, Hollywood bloodline royalty, granddaughter of Carl Reiner, stepdaughter of Penny Marshall. A woman who was born into a dynasty of scripts, stages, and secrets. But in that moment, according to Nick, she wasn't family. She was an accomplice. The woman who helped set the stage for the most shocking double murder in Hollywood history. And as detectives leaned in, asking what exactly she did, Nick gave an answer that chilled the room. She told me where to stab. The forgotten sister with the perfect reputation. To the public, Tracy Reiner was the quiet one. Not a scandal magnet. Not a headline chaser. She played supportive roles in iconic films like A League of Their Own and When Harry Met Sally, occasionally appearing on red carpets beside her legendary father. She was the calm one, the composed one, the good daughter, which made Nick's accusation all the more jarring. Tracy, the orchestrator? At first, even the lead investigators didn't buy it. But as they began pulling on threads, financial, emotional, behavioral, they started to see something very different behind the curtain. Because Tracy wasn't just the good daughter. She was the overlooked one. And overlooked people don't always stay quiet. The meeting in the study. A major crack appeared in Tracy's story during the second day of the investigation, when housekeeper Lucia Martinez gave her second statement. She had originally told police that Tracy left the estate around 11:30 p.m. the night before the murder. But then she corrected herself. No. I remember now. She said goodbye around 11:30, but she never left. I heard her voice again, around 1 a.m., from the study. She was arguing with Mr. Reiner. Lucia said the tone was sharp, heated, something about ruining everything and taking sides. Lucia didn't understand the context. She kept walking. But a study argument at 1 a.m. doesn't match Tracy's official timeline, which claims she had been asleep in her Pasadena home all night. Lucia's statement changed everything. Suddenly, Tracy had motive, opportunity, and presence. Tracy's financial storm. If there's one thing that ties most Hollywood murders together, it's not jealousy or betrayal. It's money. And Tracy was quietly drowning in debt. While her siblings thrived under Rob's legacy, Jake with his journalism career, Romy still tied to indie film circuits. Even Nick had recently inked a ghostwriting deal. Tracy had stepped back from acting. According to financial records leaked to Radar, she had 3 mortgages on 2 different properties, one of which was already in pre-foreclosure. She was also under IRS investigation for tax discrepancies totaling over $450,000. And the real kicker? Sources inside Rob's estate revealed that he was preparing to cut her out of the primary inheritance trust. Why? Because he believed she was not in a sound state of mind to handle a legacy. Those are his exact words, found in a confidential memo between him and his lawyer. The final revision of the will, set to be signed the day after the murder. Coincidence? Or motive? The missing scarf, found. Remember the blood-stained scarf the housekeeper handed over? The one found in a laundry hamper near the guest bathroom? DNA results finally came back. It belonged to Tracy. Blood patterns on the fabric match splatter from Rob's side of the bed. Investigators believe she was either standing extremely close during the attack or participated directly. Tracy's legal team pushed back hard. Our client was not involved in any physical altercation that night. She has been wrongly implicated by emotionally unstable sources. But the evidence doesn't lie. Blood doesn't move on its own. And neither does a red silk scarf that somehow made its way into a hamper in a home she was supposedly not in after midnight. The kill script document. Let's go back to Nick's guest house wall, the final cut storyboard. Among the index cards, there was a document filed in a blue folder labeled Alt Ending. This wasn't part of the timeline. It was a monologue, written in Nick's handwriting. But strangely, it used a voice that wasn't his. The heading? Tracy, private voiceover. The contents? A chilling script that began with the words, "You always said I wasn't yours. You were right. I don't belong to you. I belong to the truth. And tonight, the truth ends you." Was this Nick writing a fantasy? Or was he recording what Tracy had actually said? Detectives are investigating the possibility that Nick used the writing as a form of reenactment, a way to process or relive what happened. If true, It suggests Tracy may have spoken to Rob before, or during, the murder, using words eerily similar to what's written in that monologue. Some call it delusion. Others call it evidence. The missing footage from the theater room. The Reiner mansion included a private theater room, soundproof, projection-ready, with a high-end security feed. Footage from nearly every room was recovered, except the theater. That hard drive? Gone. Pulled from its casing. Wires clipped. But forensics discovered traces of a boot print in the cabinet housing the feed. A women's size 8.5 boot print. Tracy wears a size 8.5. That same night, according to Lucia Martinez, Tracy was wearing boots, not her usual heels. And when asked if Tracy ever accessed the theater room security system, Rob Reiner confirmed. Yes, that was kind of her thing. She handled all the screening setups. She knew the hardware better than any of us. So what was Tracy trying to erase? And more importantly, what did the footage show? Jake's silence speaks volumes. Here's where things get even messier. Once Tracy's name leaked, Jake Reiner, normally calm, articulate, and media-savvy, went dark. His social feeds went private. His agent stopped answering emails. Then, suddenly, Jake hired his own attorney. No charges had been filed against him, but he lawyered up anyway. When pressed, Jake's rep said, "Mr. Reiner is committed to assisting law enforcement in any way possible. However, given the volatile media coverage, he has retained legal counsel to protect his rights and privacy." But one question remains unanswered. Why didn't he defend Tracy? Not once has Jake publicly supported his sister. Not a tweet. Not a press release. Not even a denial. Insiders say the siblings haven't spoken since the day of the murder. Is it because he knows something we don't? Or worse, did he know everything beforehand? Nick's words, again and again. During one particularly lucid moment in interrogation, Nick reportedly said, "Tracy came to me 3 months ago. Said we had to fix it before it was too late. I thought she meant rehab. Turns out, she meant dad." If true, it suggests premeditation. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a plan. And according to Nick, Tracy made him believe he was saving the family by destroying its leader. He described her tone as hypnotic, her arguments as surgical. She didn't yell. She persuaded. She appealed to his trauma, his addiction, his need to be accepted. In Nick's words, she said, "He already killed you. I'm just asking you to wake up." Whether those are the words of a manipulative mastermind or the delusions of a disturbed man remains to be seen. But what's undeniable is this. Nick's entire motive points directly at her. A final piece of the puzzle, Tracy's cryptic message. 2 days before the murder, Tracy posted a photo to her private Instagram account, only visible to close friends. It showed an old Polaroid of her and Rob on the set of Stand By Me, smiling. The caption? "Every story ends." Simple. Innocent. Maybe. Or maybe it was the calm before the storm. But what came next would make even Nick's confession seem tame, because the next name on the list wasn't a family member. It was Rob Reiner's closest friend, a man who made America laugh for 4 decades, a man who Nick says was there every step of the way. You don't survive Hollywood for 50 years by being lucky. You survive by knowing exactly when to smile and when to look the other way. That's what an anonymous executive from Castle Rock Entertainment told a reporter after Billy Crystal's name was leaked in connection to the Reiner murder case. And the world did a collective double-take. Billy Crystal? The legendary comedian, America's Oscars host sweetheart, the charming face behind City Slickers, When Harry Met Sally, and countless iconic roles. The lifelong friend of Rob Reiner, the best man at Rob and Michelle's wedding, now suddenly named in a murder confession? To call it a plot twist doesn't do it justice. Because what came next, surveillance records, cryptic voicemails, and a paper trail no one wanted to find, would cast a long, dangerous shadow over one of Hollywood's most untouchable names. The 37-minute phone call. Let's begin with the moment that blew the investigation wide open. According to Nick Reiner's phone records, obtained through a warrant, a call was made at 4:03 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, exactly 45 minutes before Romy dialed 911. The call lasted 37 minutes. The recipient? A private number registered to a Manhattan apartment owned by none other than Billy Crystal. At first, authorities assumed it might have been a misdial. Or perhaps Nick had the number saved under Crystal's name for shock value. But when the call was cross-referenced with tower pings and Crystal's personal travel itinerary, it wasn't a misdial. Billy Crystal was in New York that night, alone and awake. When asked by reporters for a statement, his rep responded with the now infamous line, "Mr. Crystal has no comment on imaginary phone calls made by individuals in custody." Except, the call wasn't imaginary. It was verified, logged, and possibly recorded. Because Nick's phone, per forensic investigators, had a voice memo app running during the call, and part of that audio was leaked. The audio leak, is it done? Only 26 seconds of the audio has surfaced online. No one knows who leaked it, though insiders believe it was a tech from inside the digital evidence team. The clip begins with Nick whispering, "I don't know, I think she's still breathing." Then a low, gravelly voice responds. "Then finish it." There's a pause. Then the same voice adds, "Don't F*** this up, Nick." Was it Billy Crystal? Voice analysts were brought in to compare the recording with publicly available clips from Crystal's interviews and performances. And while no expert has confirmed with 100% certainty, two independent firms gave a likelihood estimate of 87% and 91% match, respectively. Let that sink in. One of America's most beloved entertainers, telling the son of his best friend to finish it. If the audio is real, and early signs suggest it is, then the implications are staggering. Billy Crystal wasn't just aware. He may have directed it. The ghost director allegation. In Nick Reiner's journal, discovered in the guest house, one passage stood out above the rest. He told me it had to look clean. "You're the actor, but I'm the director." That's what he said. And I listened, because he made me feel like I mattered. Underneath the passage was a name, circled in red ink. BC. This led investigators to what they've since dubbed the ghost director theory. That Billy Crystal was the mastermind behind the murder. That he never lifted a finger, but orchestrated every detail from a distance. Guiding Nick like a puppet, knowing the troubled son would eventually snap under pressure. And more disturbingly, that Crystal may have had his own motive for wanting Rob dead. The fallout over the expose. In the months leading up to his death, Rob Reiner was reportedly working on a confidential film project. One he hadn't announced publicly, not through Castle Rock, not through any studio. It was being funded independently. The working title? The Expose. According to a close source, the project was a fictionalized dramatization of real events, an unflinching look at abuse, secrets, and cover-ups in the Hollywood elite. The catch? Many of the characters were allegedly modeled after real people. Studio insiders, executives, actors, and yes, one of them was said to be based on Billy Crystal, a comedic legend with a golden boy public image, but a darker behind-the-scenes persona. Controlling, jealous, manipulative. When Crystal got wind of the script, the friendship reportedly fractured. He called Rob directly, screamed at him, threatened legal action. One of Michelle Reiner's friends overheard the fight on speakerphone. Billy said, "You put my name in that script, and I'll bury you." The project was paused soon after. Rob claimed it was a scheduling issue, but friends say he was spooked. Still, a week before his death, Rob had lunch with his entertainment lawyer. The subject? Relaunching the expose with an anonymous writing credit and a new ending. The timing? Terrifying. Billy's sudden withdrawal from public life. After Rob's death, Billy Crystal made a brief public statement. "I am heartbroken. Rob was my friend, my brother, my collaborator. I'm speechless." Then, silence. No appearances. No interviews. No tweets. No condolences to the Reiner family posted publicly. He canceled an upcoming Netflix special. He withdrew from a film festival in Toronto just 48 hours before he was scheduled to appear. And insiders revealed he has since moved out of his Manhattan residence, the very same address the 4 a.m. call was traced to. Where is he now? No one knows for sure. Some say he's in a compound in Arizona. Others claim he fled to Europe. What's confirmed is this. The LAPD has attempted to question him. So far, he's refused. His legal team claims he has no relevant information. But if the voice on that tape is proven to be his, relevant will be the least of his worries. The dinner party surveillance. One last piece of evidence deepens the mystery. On the night of the murder, at exactly 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Billy Crystal was seen attending a small dinner party in Manhattan. Surveillance footage from the restaurant shows him laughing, chatting, seemingly relaxed. He stayed until 10:30 p.m., then left alone. But here's what's strange. The restaurant owner later told police. Billy seemed off that night. Normally, he's the life of the table. That night, he was watching the door, kept checking his phone. Phone records confirmed he made 3 calls between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., all to Nick's number. Only one went through. The 4:03 a.m. call. The one that lasted 37 minutes. The one that may have contained the words, "Then finish it." So why would Billy do it? That's the burning question. Why would one of Hollywood's most cherished icons conspire to murder his best friend? There are a few theories. The script motive. The exposé threatened to reveal long-buried secrets. Crystal's portrayal in the film could have destroyed his reputation. The legacy shift. Rob's rising influence in political circles, especially post-2024, may have threatened Crystal's control over shared ventures. Financial betrayal. A leaked Castle Rock memo revealed Rob had planned to buy out Crystal's shares in a joint venture. The price? $1. He said Billy's name no longer held value. The memo read. Personal jealousy. Some insiders claim Crystal always felt second best to Rob. That Rob got the respect, while Billy got the laughs. And maybe, just maybe, he couldn't handle that anymore. But what if Billy wasn't just a mastermind? What if he wasn't alone? Because according to Nick, there was someone else on that call. Someone whispering in the background. Someone even closer to Rob than Billy. Who? You won't believe the next name on Nick's list. The Manhattan safety deposit box. 10 days after the murders, a quiet but crucial event took place far from the flashing cameras of Brentwood or the press hounding the LAPD in Los Angeles. A subpoena was served to a Manhattan bank where Rob Reiner kept a small but long-standing safety deposit box under the name of R&M Legacy Trust, a joint entity shared between Rob and Michelle. When investigators opened the box, they expected to find perhaps personal heirlooms, old film reels, or private family keepsakes. Instead, they found a sealed manila envelope marked, "In case of emergency," read first, in Rob's handwriting. Inside was a 5-page document, typed, dated, and signed. A contract, one that outlined the formal dissolution of a long-standing private financial partnership between Rob Reiner and Billy Crystal. The wording was cold, legal, clear. The contract was structured too. The contract that broke everything. Inside that sealed envelope, Rob Reiner had outlined a quiet but final execution of what he called a creative and financial entanglement with Mr. William J. Crystal. The contract, dated but never signed, did 3 devastating things. Terminated a 30-year royalty-sharing agreement connected to multiple Castle Rock entertainment back-end profits, including hits like The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, and Analyze This. Removed Billy Crystal as a silent partner in a legacy fund Rob had established to support independent political films and documentaries. That fund was expected to grow to $120 million over the next decade. Revoked shared rights to a production company they co-founded, reassigning full creative control to Rob and naming Nick Reiner, not Billy, as the next-in-line co-executive. This was more than a financial slap. It was war. Billy stood to lose millions in lifetime royalties, not to mention creative credit and symbolic status. But the real dagger? The clause at the end, underlined by hand, read, "Due to Mr. Crystal's continued opposition, interference, and verbal threats regarding my current projects, this contract shall be enforced with zero recourse once signed." Rob Reiner had made up his mind. He was cutting Billy Crystal out of the empire they'd built. And this, discovered after Rob's death, was the closest thing to a smoking gun investigators had seen yet. So the question becomes, did Billy know about this document before Rob was murdered? The alleged blackmail voicemail. We need to rewind, back to 2 months before the murders. Nick Reiner's phone contained dozens of deleted voicemails, most of which were recovered through a forensic data extraction tool. One of them, timestamped 6 weeks prior to the murder, was from an unknown number traced to a prepaid burner phone later linked to a handler once employed by Billy's production company. The message was short, scrambled audio, voice distorted, but what can be heard is this. He signs, "It's over for me. We can't let that happen." Pressure him. Remind him of the photos. Photos? Of what? Rob had been famously clean, never scandal-ridden, never caught in compromising positions. But what if someone else wasn't? And what if Rob had proof? Theories have swirled since that voicemail surfaced. Some say Billy feared Rob had blackmail material on him, photos, videos, or written statements from their wild early days in the industry. Perhaps something more recent. Maybe it was tied to the Expose project. Maybe Rob had based a character too closely on Billy's real secrets. Secrets Billy couldn't afford to let surface. Whatever it was, the pressure campaign had begun long before the first knife was lifted. The email chain BCC, that changed everything. Even more damning was a leaked email thread between Rob Reiner and his estate attorney, titled simply, Transfer of Control, NR versus BC. The thread was brief but powerful. In it, Rob states, Nick deserves a chance. Billy has refused to support him. I'm finalizing the shift. Nick replaces Billy on all creative legacy decisions. It was dated 14 days before the murders. But here's the twist. Rob blind copied someone. The BCC line. And digital forensics identified that recipient as Billy Crystal's manager. Why? Was it a warning? A power play? Or did Rob want Billy to know, without officially confronting him, that his time was over? If so, it backfired. Because 6 days after that BCC email was sent, Billy bought a round-trip ticket to LA. He canceled it the night before the flight. Instead, he stayed in New York. And then came the 4:03 a.m. call. A private island. A sudden escape. Let's talk about Billy's disappearance. Something his PR team refuses to call anything but a personal sabbatical. Just 3 days after the leaked accomplice list made headlines, Billy's private jet was recorded flying to an obscure landing strip in the Bahamas. There, according to FAA filings, he transferred to a helicopter. Destination: Cat Island, an isolated strip of land known for two things: no extradition treaties, and one secluded private resort owned by a shell corporation that's been tied to multiple celebrities. Satellite images later confirmed the island's largest private villa had been prepped for a guest the day before his arrival. No public statements have followed since. No attorneys have responded to court inquiries. And still, Billy Crystal has not been officially charged. Why? Because the LAPD says they need irrefutable proof before indicting someone of his stature. But for many following the case, it's already too late. In the court of public opinion, Billy Crystal is guilty of something. And then there's Romy. In one of Nick's most cryptic statements, he said, Billy wasn't alone on the call. I heard her. I know her voice. When asked who, Nick didn't answer directly. He just stared forward and whispered. She was always the favorite. Investigators believe he meant Romy Reiner, his youngest sister, and the first person to call 911. And if what he's implying is true, then the rabbit hole isn't just deep, it's endless. Because while Nick named Tracy, Jake, and Billy, the person in the background that night might have been the most dangerous of all. Final notes of Chapter 3. Let's recap what we now know. Nick and Billy Crystal had a 37-minute call right before the murder. A voice recording possibly featuring Billy says, then finish it. Rob Reiner left behind a document cutting Billy out of everything. A burner phone voicemail suggested blackmail. Emails BCC'd to Billy's team warned of his removal. Billy fled to a non-extradition island within days of the leak. Nick claims someone else was on that call, and hints it may have been Romy. So now we ask, was Billy Crystal truly the mastermind? Or was he being used, like Nick, by someone else entirely? Because the real puppeteer may not be who anyone expected. And in Chapter 4, the focus shifts to the one sibling who said the least, but may know the most. She made the 911 call. She vanished the next day. She never once defended anyone. And she may be the only Reiner left who knows the truth. He always smiled when the cameras were on. But when they were off, it was like watching a mask peel off his face. Anonymous crew member from one of Jake Reiner's early journalism segments. He was the polished one, the articulate one, the golden son of the Reiner legacy. Jake Reiner, the Ivy League graduate turned respected journalist, was the one the public never questioned. While Tracy dabbled in acting and Nick battled addiction, Jake stood tall in polished shoes, tailored suits, and flawless press releases. He was the face Rob Reiner proudly held up at fundraisers, the voice trusted to narrate evening news segments, the son who never disappointed. Until now. Because when Nick Reiner sat down in that interrogation room and was asked a simple question, "Did anyone else help you plan this?" he didn't say yes. He smiled, and then said, "Jake knows what I mean by Scene 4. He always has. The mystery of Scene 4. Let's start here. Scene 4 appeared multiple times in Nick's journal. Each time, it was underlined, circled, highlighted. No clear context. Just phrases like, "Scene 4 is locked. Jake said we're ready." Scene 4, that's when the lights go out. To outsiders, it sounded like screenwriting gibberish. A leftover from Rob's days of directing. Maybe a metaphor. But to investigators, it was a code. And once they dug deeper into Jake's world, they began to understand what Scene 4 really meant. Because Jake Reiner wasn't just a journalist. He was an actor. Not in the theatrical sense, no. But in the way he navigated both Hollywood and hard news with a calculated finesse that few in the industry noticed until now. And that act was beginning to unravel. The deleted surveillance backup. The Reiner mansion was equipped with a sophisticated, private security system. One Jake had personally helped his father install 2 years ago. He had recommended the tech, configured the remote access. And according to logs recovered by the LAPD, Jake had logged into the system remotely just 3 hours before the murder, from his apartment in Los Feliz. That access triggered a backup overwrite, essentially wiping the autosave cache for the theater room camera system. When asked why he accessed the feed at 1:11 a.m., Jake told detectives, "I got a motion alert. I just wanted to make sure everything was fine." But there's a problem with that answer. Because the motion alert system had been disabled days prior, on his request. An email sent to the system's support line on Jake's official email reads, "Please pause all motion alerts temporarily. Testing scheduled. GR." That testing was never confirmed by Rob. So what was Jake really doing at 1:11 a.m.? And why did a core piece of surveillance footage disappear immediately after? The secret podcast clip. Jake Reiner hosted a low-profile podcast called The Fourth Wall, where he often discussed media ethics, legacy, and occasionally, his own experiences growing up under the weight of fame. In one now-deleted episode titled Inheritance of Shadows, Jake discussed the pressure of legacy and included the following chilling monologue. Sometimes a story ends not because it's complete, but because the narrator changes. And maybe, just maybe, it's okay to write the ending yourself, even if the world isn't ready for it. At the time, it flew under the radar. Now, it reads like a confession. The episode was deleted from every platform 48 hours after the murders. Archived copies were quickly scrubbed. Only one recording remains, sent anonymously to a true crime channel and quietly uploaded to the dark web. LAPD has obtained the copy. They haven't commented on it. But one line stands out. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you take back. Scene 4 is just the beginning. Jake's sudden lawyer up. Jake wasn't named publicly in Nick's original list. But when the leak happened, he hired a criminal defense attorney within 2 hours. Not a family lawyer. Not a publicist. A criminal attorney. When questioned by LAPD detectives, Jake invoked his Fifth Amendment rights 7 times in a single interview. Each invocation was related to questions about surveillance access, his whereabouts between 1:00:50 a.m., a message found on Nick's phone with the phrase, "We're cleared for Scene 4, a possible burner phone trace, the deleted podcast episode, his meeting with Billy Crystal the week before the murders, a wire transfer sent to an untraceable shell company in Delaware. What was Jake hiding? More importantly, why wasn't he defending himself? He had the platform, the reputation, the voice, but he said nothing, which, to many, says everything. The transfer of power. One of the more haunting discoveries made in Rob Reiner's digital estate was a document titled 2025 Reassignment Memo. It outlined a shift in the Reiner Foundation's leadership, transferring all decision-making power to Jake Reiner. Not Tracy, not Nick, just Jake. The memo was never signed, but it was drafted. It was ready. It was real. And attached to it, a note Rob had scribbled in the margins. Still unsure. Jake is too polished. Something I can't quite explain. Need more time. Those words were dated 3 days before the murder. It was as if Rob sensed something was wrong, but didn't act fast enough. And that hesitation might have cost him everything. The voice behind the mask. Multiple people who worked with Jake in media circles described him similarly. Charming, but cold. Hyper-controlled. Always calculating. One former segment producer said, Jake never raised his voice. Never made a scene. But if you crossed him, you'd be out. Silently. Brutally. He's surgical with how he eliminates threats. That quote resurfaced when police discovered a series